Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Thursday, which is time for a basic terminology video. And today we're going to be talking about hardware and outboard gear. Two words that mean more or less the same idea, but the outboard gear fits a particular niche, and it has to do with boards. I probably should have had one kind of here so you can see what I'm talking about. I guess I can. Nah, that's a bad idea. Anyway, board in this sense refers to a mixing console. Just Google mixing console and you will immediately recognize what I'm talking about. Everyone has seen a mixing console. Everyone knows what that is. Or mixing desk, mixing a mixer. That's what they are. And outboard gear are essentially the plugins of the hardware world that existed. I mean, they still exist, but they were basically what plugins were for before there were, virtual versions of them. So, like, if you wanted to put a compressor on a particular signal chain, you had your mixer insert, your mixer channel, that kind of thing. You plug it in there, and then you would have sends. You have send and return, and then the send would send the signal out, and the return would put it back in there, so you still have control over everything. It still goes out to where that particular thing is going out, and then in between that is the outboard gear. Much of it is rack mounted. The idea is you ever seen these giant racks of things? I mean, even this, like, I still have these out because I was using them for the audio interface idea. But the idea is basically that, like, you have racks of stuff that, like, you put in, and that they'd run the gamut of, like, the kinds of effects you want to have, like equalizers, compressors, filters, that kind of thing, reverb units. Every sort of thing you can think of, like, that's what outboard gear is for. That's what it's all designed to do. Because a lot of boards also have built-in effects and that kind of thing, built-in sends even that you can, like, route stuff into and whatever. And the idea, of course, is that external gear is better than the internal effects you're likely to find on a mixing board. Much like the idea is that third-party plugins are better in a DAW than the stock stuff. That's not necessarily always true, but the hardware world, it usually is the case. But then there's that other word, hardware. So hardware is extremely simple. It basically just means it's something that's real, because you're basically putting the difference between hardware and software. So, like, hardware is literally, hard. It exists. It is what it is. And then software is just a bunch of ones and zeros and exists only as a sequence of such on a hard drive somewhere, like an SSD even. That's not even really a hard disk anymore. But and its relevance to production, because if you're looking at this video, it probably means you're interested in production of music. The value of the word hardware tends to be blown out of proportion a bit, because there's this assumption that if something is hardware, that it's better than software, that it's better at whatever the job is that this guy going on. The idea that that hardware, like a guitar head, guitar distortion, and hardware distortion is just better than digital distortion. Never mind the fact that, oh boy, and here's actually a big thing, is that when people say hardware, they're usually confusing it with analog, which will actually be another video, because analog means something wholly different than just hardware. There is, of course, analog hardware, but in fact, I'm pretty sure this unit is exclusively analog hardware, but in the sense that all things that are analog are going to be hardware, but not all hardware is analog. And there might be analog ideas in there, but there's also digital ideas. In fact, a lot of this stuff, which people assume is largely analog, and a lot of it is analog, but also a lot of it's digital. Like this guy. This is Mutable Instruments Clouds. It's called Clouds. I knew it was called Clouds. I forgot who made it. It's Mutable Instruments Clouds. It's a granulizer. It's digital. It's fully fucking digital. And there's this guy. This is the Herb Verb from Make Noise. It's also digital. In fact, if you ever see a reverb unit like this, that's not something called a spring reverb or like any of the other crazier, like, hardware reverbs, then it's digital, because analog reverb is just echoes. It's just actually echoes. Like, get a bigger room. That's what analog reverb is. But and a lot of the hardware synthesizers out there are also digital. And so a lot of times people are just being like, oh, I want to get hardware, or like, that song is so good because they use hardware. It does not necessarily mean that they did anything that you can't do. And whatever. I also I've seen already the video I did on gear, whether or not you need gear in the production basics series. It's the same basic idea. It's just that kind of thing. But I just wanted to sort of put out, you know, the definition of what those words mean, because hardware especially is important. It's really important that you don't marry the idea of hardware and analog, because plenty of hardware is also digital. Same thing with outboard gear. Plenty of outboard gear is totally digital stuff. It's the same basic constraints as, you know, analog synthesizers, analog effects, and hardware effects may not. Some of them are going to be analog, and some of them aren't going to be. A lot of them are going to be analog but digitally controlled. Like the difference in terms of what like literal analog and literal digital are very interwoven in modern sort of hardware architecture. And, you know, it's really because, like, while we're talking about analog stuff, as good as, you know, a hardware analog is, like, digital and software will always be better. And a lot of you are thinking, wow, that's a strangely specific thing to say. Like, you usually are a lot more, oh, what's the word, diplomatic about saying that kind of stuff. Like, you're not usually all that certain about it. And I'm not, when I say better, I don't necessarily mean as a direct comparison as saying, here's a saw wave and analog, and here's a digital saw wave. Digital saw wave is better, or, you know, what the hell does that even mean? What I mean by better is that digital and software can do more than analog and hardware forever, always, no matter what. And that's just always been true. That's not always mattered to people. People will sacrifice functionality for the idea that, like, the individual thing they're able to do is somehow higher quality, and it may or may not be. And it's really subjective. It's all super duper subjective. But in terms of just raw possibility and potential and, like, functional superiority, digital and software will always have that for extremely obvious reasons. But it's not really the point of this video, is it? This video is just telling you what the word hardware means and what outboard gear means. But yeah, that was a rambly fucking video. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Also, at this time, my sale on the lessons that I'm doing, I do one-on-one lessons over Skype, and if you want them, the sale I'm having on it is ending soon. Check out the link in the description of the video for more information on how lessons work. And as usual, have a nice day.